He thought she was just another black woman to humiliate. He thought his badge gave him the right to insult, shove, even strike her. What he never expected was that the woman he assaulted in broad daylight would be the very person who controlled his future. Because she wasn't just any woman, she was his boss. Angela Brooks walked calmly down the busy downtown street, her leather bag resting firmly on her shoulder. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, yet something about her commanded respect. Years of struggle, of proving herself twice over in a world that doubted her at every step, had built that strength in her. She was on her way to the police headquarters, though the crowd rushing past her had no idea who she really was. This is not just a story about racism, it's a story about dignity, justice, and a shocking twist you won't believe. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Black Voices Unheard and turn on the bell, so stories like this are never silenced again. And if you believe Black lives deserve dignity, hit the like button right now. A police cruiser screeched to a stop near the curb. Officer Mark Reynolds stepped out with the arrogance of a man who wore his uniform like a crown. His eyes scanned the street until they landed on Angela, who was waiting at the crosswalk for the light to turn green. "Hey, you there! Move along," he barked. "Don't stand around here loitering." Angela lifted her head, surprised but not shaken. "Excuse me, I'm just waiting for the light." "Don't talk back," Reynolds snapped. "I said move unless you want trouble." She straightened her posture, her calm voice cutting through his hostility. "I have every right to stand here. The light is red." His jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Typical. Think you know the law better than me? You people never learn." Those words, "you people," hung in the air like poison. Passers-by slowed down, sensing something ugly about to unfold. Angela met his glare without flinching. "I suggest you lower your tone, officer." That only made him angrier. With a shove of his hand against her shoulder, he tried to knock the defiance out of her. The crowd gasped as she stumbled but quickly regained her balance. She didn't raise her hands, didn't back down. Her voice, steady as steel, cut through the tension. "Touch me again and you'll regret it." Reynolds let out a cruel laugh. "Regret it? Lady, I am the law." And then it happened. His hand lashed out, striking her across the face. The sound cracked through the street. Phones were raised instantly, recording. Bystanders shouted in disbelief. But Angela did not cry. She did not plead. She stood tall, her cheek burning red, but her dignity untouched. Her eyes locked onto him, not with fear, but with a quiet fire. What Reynolds didn't know, what none of the onlookers yet realized, was that the woman he had just hit was no ordinary pedestrian. She was the one person in this city who could end his career with a single word. The traffic light turned green. Angela stepped forward, brushing past him with the calm of someone who knew exactly what was about to come next. The crowd erupted in murmurs. "She's gonna sue him. That was on camera. He's done for." But Angela said nothing, not yet, because this was only the beginning. The street was still buzzing with shock. Strangers huddled, whispering in outrage. A few brave ones shouted after Reynolds, calling him a coward, a racist, a disgrace. But he ignored them. He stood there smirking, as if the strike he had delivered was some badge of honor. Angela, however, didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. She simply adjusted her bag on her shoulder, lifted her chin, and walked away. Every step she took was deliberate, graceful, powerful, controlled. Behind her, Reynolds sneered, "That'll teach her." He had no idea that his own words would come back to haunt him. Within minutes, videos of the incident began flooding social media. The slap, the shove, the arrogance. It was all captured in clear detail. Comments exploded online. "This cop needs to be fired immediately." "Racist trash with a badge. Does anyone know who the woman is? She handled it like a queen." By the time Angela reached the tall glass doors of the police headquarters, the city was already buzzing. Inside, officers were talking in hushed tones, phones ringing, non-stop. News outlets were picking it up. replaying the shocking footage over and over. Angela walked through the lobby, ignoring the stares. She pressed the elevator button and waited calmly. Her cheeks still stung, but she didn't touch it. She didn't need pity. She needed patience. As the elevator doors closed, she allowed herself the faintest smile. Reynolds thought she was powerless. He thought she was just another black woman he could humiliate on the street. But soon he would learn the truth. Upstairs, the atmosphere was tense. Officers clustered around monitors, watching the viral video. No one noticed Angela step out of the elevator. No one except Chief Daniels, a seasoned black man in his 60s with a commanding presence. He hurried over to her, his eyes scanning the red mark on her cheek. "Angela," he whispered, his voice low but heavy with concern. "It's already everywhere." She nodded calmly. "Good." "Good?" he asked, surprised. She looked him in the eye, her voice steady. "Sometimes the truth needs to be seen before it can't be ignored." Meanwhile, across town, Reynolds strutted into the precinct like a man untouchable. His partner, Officer Miller, leaned against the desk, phone in hand. "You're trending, Mark," Miller muttered. Reynolds grinned. "Yeah? Bet it's about time people see what happens when they mess with me." Miller didn't share the laugh. "You don't get it. The video's everywhere. They're calling for your badge already." Reynolds waved him off. "Let 'em talk. They'll forget by tomorrow. They always do. The department won't touch me. I've got protection." His arrogance was unshaken. He truly believed he was untouchable. He had no idea the storm that was building around him. Back at headquarters, Angela entered the large conference room. A meeting was about to begin. Officers, detectives, and commanders filled the seats. Conversations hushed the moment she walked in. Reynolds strolled in a few minutes later, still smirking, unaware of who had just taken her seat at the head of the table. He saw her and frowned. "What's she doing here?" he muttered under his breath. Angela didn't look at him. She opened her folder, laid out her notes, and waited until the room settled. The respect in the eyes of the other officers was unmistakable. Reynolds slouched back in his chair, confused. Then came the moment. Angela lifted her gaze and spoke, her voice calm but powerful enough to silence the room. "Let's begin. As you all know, I am Dr. Angela Brooks, your newly appointed Director of Internal Affairs." The silence that followed was suffocating. All eyes snapped to Reynolds, whose smug expression collapsed instantly. His face drained of color as the reality sank in. The woman he had insulted, shoved, and struck in front of cameras and witnesses was his boss. Angela's eyes found his. For the first time, she allowed herself the faintest smile, not of revenge, but of justice. "This department is under my review," she continued, "and every officer's actions will be held accountable. No exceptions." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, sweat forming on his brow. The same arrogance he had carried minutes ago was gone. The tables had turned, and this was only the beginning of his reckoning. The air in the conference room was thick with silence. Reynolds sat frozen in his chair, eyes darting from Angela to the faces of the other officers. Whispers rippled quietly around the table, but no one dared to speak too loudly. Angela continued, her voice steady, every word sharp and deliberate. "In recent weeks, complaints of misconduct have risen in this department. My role is not symbolic. I am here to investigate, to expose, and to enforce accountability. The public deserves a police force it can trust." She let her words settle, her gaze never leaving Reynolds. "Some officers have abused their badges," she said, her tone cool but cutting. "Some believe the uniform gives them power to belittle, to threaten, even to assault civilians." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He tried to speak, but Angela raised her hand slightly, silencing him before he even began. "You'll have your chance to speak, Officer Reynolds," she said, "but for now, you'll listen." The room was tense. His name, spoken aloud, landed like a hammer. Everyone understood. Reynolds clenched his jaw, but he forced a smirk. "With all due respect, ma'am, I was doing my job. The woman in that video was resisting. Angela's voice cut through him like a blade. The woman in that video, she said, her eyes narrowing, was me. The entire room went silent. Chairs creaked as officers sat straighter. Someone in the back let out a gasp. Reynolds went pale. His lips parted, but no words came out. His arrogance had evaporated. Angela leaned forward slightly, her tone still calm but carrying the weight of thunder. You struck your superior officer. You humiliated this department in front of the entire city, and you revealed the ugly truth about how you see the people you swore to protect. Reynolds stammered. I didn't know. That's the point, Angela interrupted. You didn't care. To you, I was just another black woman on the street. Another target for your prejudice. Another life you could trample on because you thought your badge made you invincible. The words hit him harder than any blow. Sweat trickled down his forehead. He glanced around, searching for support, but none came. His fellow officers avoided his eyes. Some shook their heads in disgust. Angela turned to the rest of the room. Let me be clear. What happened today is not just about me. It is about every complaint ignored, every civilian silenced, every abuse swept under the rug. That ends now. The officers shifted uncomfortably. They knew this was no ordinary lecture. It was a warning. Reynolds finally found his voice, weak and defensive. I was under pressure. People exaggerate. These videos, people twist them. It's not what it looks like. Angela's expression remained unreadable. I watched it myself. The city watched it. And what they saw was exactly what you are. A man who disgraced his badge. He slammed his fist on the table, desperate to salvage his pride. You can't destroy my career over one mistake. Angela leaned back in her chair, calm as ever. I don't have to. You already did that yourself. The silence that followed was suffocating. Angela gathered her papers, her voice soft but resolute. Officer Reynolds, you are suspended, effective immediately. An internal review will begin, and the district attorney has already requested the footage. You will answer for your actions. Reynolds stood up abruptly, his chair screeching across the floor. This is a witch hunt. You think you can come in here and... Angela's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. Sit down, officer. This is not a debate. This is justice. He froze. For the first time, the man who thought himself untouchable realized he was cornered. His badge no longer shielded him. His arrogance no longer protected him. Angela gathered her notes and walked out of the room, leaving behind stunned silence and a broken man whose downfall had just begun. In the hallway, whispers followed her, but they weren't whispers of doubt. They were whispers of respect. For the first time, the department felt the presence of a leader who would not be silenced. And Reynolds knew his reckoning had only just begun. The news cycle moved fast, but the story refused to fade. By evening, every major network was replaying the video of Reynolds striking Angela. The clips spread like wildfire across phones, televisions, social media feeds. Headlines screamed, "Officer assaults black woman on camera. Community demands accountability. Viral video sparks outrage." What none of the public knew yet was that the woman in the video wasn't just a random civilian. She was the new director of internal affairs. That detail had been kept quiet within the department, at least for the moment. Angela wanted the truth revealed in the right way. But Reynolds couldn't wait. At a smoky downtown bar, he sat with a few officers who still circled around him like vultures. He slammed his beer bottle on the table, anger spilling from his words. "She's setting me up," he growled. "That woman, she made me look like the villain. You all saw it? She provoked me." One of the younger officers shifted uneasily. "Mark, the video." "I don't care about the video," Reynolds barked. "These things get twisted. If we don't fight back, they'll crucify me. And if they crucify me, you're all next. Don't think this department won't turn on you too." The men exchanged glances. They weren't sure if Reynolds was protecting them or dragging them down with him. Later that night, Reynolds contacted a reporter he knew from a conservative outlet. He fed him a story, painting Angela as aggressive, disrespectful, out of control. He claimed she resisted police orders and threatened his authority. By morning, the spin was already online. A headline read, "Cop under attack. Officer says he was provoked by angry black woman." The narrative was ugly. It played into every racist stereotype Angela had fought against her whole life. Inside headquarters, officers scrolled through their phones, some shaking their heads, others muttering under their breath. Chief Daniels stormed into Angela's office, holding a tablet with the headline glowing on the screen. "Look at this garbage," he fumed. "He's trying to smear you before the public learns who you are." Angela studied the article calmly. Her face was unreadable. "Let him," she said quietly. Chief Daniels frowned. "You're not angry?" Angela closed her folder slowly, her voice steady. "I'm not here to win a shouting match in the press. I'm here to let the truth speak for itself. And when the city learns exactly who I am, Reynolds won't be able to spin his way out of it." The chief nodded reluctantly. He had seen leaders lose themselves in anger, but Angela was different. She was patient, calculating. Meanwhile, Reynolds doubled down. He gave anonymous interviews, leaked exaggerated reports, even rallied a few loyal officers to whisper against Angela in the halls. "She's making this personal," they said. "She's targeting him because of one mistake." But the truth had a way of shining through cracks. The video, replayed endlessly, left little room for interpretation. Viewers saw a calm woman at a crosswalk. They saw her shoved. They saw her slapped. And they saw her dignity in the aftermath. The people weren't buying Reynolds' lies. Protests erupted outside the precinct. Crowds held signs that read, "Fire racist cops. Justice for Angela. We won't be silenced." The chants grew louder each day. Reporters swarmed the building, demanding statements. Inside, Reynolds paced like a caged animal. "They're eating me alive out there. Someone has to stop this." But when he stormed into the next meeting, ready to bark and shout, he froze once more at the sight of Angela at the head of the table. Calm, poised, watching him like a mirror reflecting his every flaw. Her words cut the air with precision. "The department is under review. All misconduct cases are being reopened. No officer is above the law." Reynolds opened his mouth to speak, but Angela raised her hand slightly. The authority in the gesture was undeniable. "You've spoken enough," she said softly. "Now it's time to listen." Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room, and for the first time in his career, Reynolds realized that his power, the swagger, the arrogance, the untouchable shield, was gone. The city was watching. The department was shifting. And Angela was in control. Reynolds' world was unraveling. Every news channel replayed his brutality. Every protest outside the precinct chanted his name in disgust. His phone buzzed with angry messages, even threats. Neighbors avoided him. Old friends refused his calls. For the first time in his life, Officer Mark Reynolds felt powerless. He stormed into the locker room one evening, fists clenched, eyes burning. A couple of younger officers glanced at him nervously and quickly looked away. He could hear their whispers. "That's him, the one who hit her. Career's over. He'll be lucky not to end up in jail." Reynolds punched the metal locker so hard the sound echoed through the room. His knuckles split, blood trickling down. He didn't care. "They think they can do this to me," he muttered. "They think they can take me down over her?" He slammed the locker again, breathing hard. That night, he hatched a desperate plan. If he couldn't win the public, if he couldn't silence the protests, then maybe he could intimidate the woman herself. Maybe fear would make her back off. But Reynolds didn't understand who he was dealing with. The following morning, Angela arrived at headquarters as calm as ever. Her tailored suit was flawless, her stride steady. She walked past reporters shouting questions, past protesters raising their fists, past officers who now parted like the sea when she entered. When she reached her office, she found her door slightly ajar. Inside, papers were scattered across her desk, a file drawer left open. Her instincts sharpened instantly. And there he was, Reynolds, standing by her window, his uniform disheveled, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Angela didn't flinch. She set her bag down gently and looked at him. "You shouldn't be here," he sneered. "You think you can destroy me? You think because you got a title and some protesters screaming your name, you can erase everything I've built?" Angela folded her arms. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "You destroyed yourself the moment you put your hands on me, and the moment you let the world see who you truly are." Reynolds stepped closer, his voice lowering to a growl. "You're not better than me. You're just another one of them, and I'll make sure everyone sees it." Angela's eyes narrowed. "If you touch me again, you won't just lose your badge, you'll lose your freedom." For a moment, the tension was razor sharp. Reynolds's fists clenched, his chest heaved, but as he looked at her, standing firm, unshaken, the fire in her eyes told him something he couldn't ignore. She wasn't afraid. He expected fear. He wanted fear. But what he saw was strength, strength that made him feel smaller than he ever had in his life. Suddenly the door burst open. Chief Daniels and two internal affairs officers entered, their voices booming. "Reynolds, step away from her!" Reynolds spun around, caught like a criminal. The officers rushed forward, restraining him as he shouted and thrashed. "This is a setup. She's ruining me. You can't do this." But his words meant nothing now. Angela watched silently as they dragged him from her office. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply gathered her scattered papers, placing them neatly back in order. Chief Daniels looked at her, shaking his head. "He's finished." Angela met his gaze. Her tone was calm but resolute. "No, he's exposed, and now the department must decide what kind of men it wants wearing its badge." Word of Reynolds' breakdown spread quickly. The officers who once laughed with him now shook their heads in shame. The community that once feared men like him now stood taller, voices stronger. And Angela, through it all, remained steady. Her dignity never wavered. Her power never corrupted. The tables had turned completely. The man who had once struck her in arrogance was now stripped of his badge, his reputation shattered. And the woman he thought was powerless had proven to be the very force destined to end his reign of hate. The courtroom was silent, every seat filled. Reporters lined the back, cameras clicking as Officer Mark Reynolds shuffled in. No longer in uniform, but in a wrinkled suit that did little to hide the downfall of a man who once strutted like a king. His wrists bore the faint marks of handcuffs. His arrogance, once overflowing, was nowhere to be found. On the opposite side sat Angela Brooks, calm, composed. The faint scar of his slap had long faded, but the memory was alive in every person watching. She didn't sit as a victim. She sat as a witness, as a leader, as living proof that dignity cannot be struck down. The prosecution laid out the case with ease. The video spoke louder than any argument. Reynolds' shove, his words dripping with contempt, his hands striking across her face, the crowd gasping, her composure in the aftermath. There was no defense strong enough to rewrite what the world had seen. Reynolds' lawyer tried anyway, fumbling about stress and provocation. But the jury's faces were hard, unmoved. The truth was undeniable. Angela took the stand, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. "I was not a stranger resisting an officer," she said, her words carrying across the silent courtroom. "I was a woman standing at a crosswalk, a law-abiding citizen, and even if I had been no one of importance, I would still deserve dignity." He didn't see a person that day. He saw a target. He saw my skin and assumed it made me less. But I am not less. None of us are less. We are human. We are equal. And it is time officers like him understand that. Her testimony hung in the air like thunder. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty of assault, guilty of misconduct, guilty of abusing his power. Reynolds lowered his head, his shoulders slumping, as if the weight of his own hate had finally crushed him. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded with protesters who had followed the case from the beginning. When Angela emerged, the chants erupted into cheers. "Justice for Angela! Justice for all!" But Angela raised her hand, quieting the crowd. Her voice carried with calm authority. "This is not about me alone," she said. "This is about every black man and woman who has been silenced, struck, or disrespected under the excuse of law and order. Today was not my victory. Today was a reminder that dignity cannot be beaten down, that justice cannot be silenced forever. The struggle continues, but so does our strength." The crowd roared, not in anger, but in hope. That night, news anchors replayed her words, calling her a symbol of resilience. Social media lit up with praise, people calling her the woman who stood tall. But Angela never sought titles or praise. In her office, long after the cameras had turned away, she sat quietly at her desk, looking out at the city lights. She thought of those who hadn't lived to see justice, those whose names were lost in silence. She thought of the battles still ahead, and she whispered to herself, as much a promise as a prayer, "We rise. Always, we rise." Across town, Reynolds sat in his cell, staring at the concrete wall. The silence mocked him. He had lost his badge, his power, his illusion of superiority. And in its place, he was left with nothing but the truth he had tried so hard to deny, that hate destroys the one who carries it more than the one it's aimed at. Angela Brooks had walked through fire and emerged unburned. She had shown the world that dignity, when held firm, becomes unshakable power. And her story would not be forgotten. Because the world had seen, the world had heard, and the world would remember. This is not just a story about one racist cop and one black woman. It is a story about power abused and dignity defended. A story that mirrors the struggles of countless voices silenced throughout history. But just as Angela proved, silence doesn't last forever. The time for justice, for equality, for recognition of black humanity is always now. Because black voices will not remain unheard.